Welcome to meeting number 57th of the Standing Committee of Public Accounts of the House of Commons, pursuant to 1083. The committee is meeting in the context of its study of reports 1 to 4 of the Auditor General of Canada's report March 2023, referred to the committee this Monday, March 26th.
Welcome our witnesses from the Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, the Auditor General, Carrie Agnew, Principal, hello, Milan Duvenjak, Principal as well, Susan Gomez, Principal, and Sami Hanush, Principal. Thank you all for joining us today. We will have a somewhat modified committee meeting. We're going to hear from the Auditor General with her opening remarks for 5 minutes or so. Then I'm going to do opening rounds about 5 or 6 minutes per member. Of course, if they would like, they can truncate those, because then we will turn to just rounds of questions for about 3 minutes till either we exhaust the time or we hit 12:15. So, Ms. Hogan, without further ado, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, my opening remarks are about twice as long because it is the same remarks that I'll be giving at the press conference. Okay. All right.
I'm prepared to indulge that. So go ahead, Ms. Hogan. Okay. We will listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss 4 performance audit reports that were just tabled in the House of Commons. The 4 audits covered a variety of government activities, yet they are linked by a common thread. That thread is inclusion.
Audits are important because every person, regardless of his, her, or their health status, gender, or location, has a right to participate fully and equally in society. Consider this. It's frustrating enough to land after a flight only to find that your luggage didn't make it. Now consider the impact when that missing cargo is not your toothbrush or a change of clothes, but your wheelchair. And without it, you are unable to move around independently. Some people in Canada have to constantly fight for rights that others take for granted as basic rights. Whether access to these rights is delayed or denied, the impact is that some members of society are excluded or left behind. This is the current concern that these 4 audits are highlighting today. So now let me turn to our findings. Our first audit focused on whether Via Rail, the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, and the Canadian Transportation Agency worked to identify, remove, and prevent barriers for travelers with disabilities. In 2019 and 2020, more than 1 million persons with disabilities who traveled on a federally regulated mode of transportation faced a barrier. Nous avons constaté que les 3 organisations
We found that all 3 organizations had identified some barriers and taken steps to improve accessibility. Via Rail held consultations with persons with disabilities to design its new fleet. Via Rail also consulted on its accessibility plan as well as its training programs, as did the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority. Despite improved accessibility, many barriers remained. For example, we found that websites were not fully accessible, which is very concerning because this is a barrier that travelers with disabilities often face. To further improve the accessibility of trains, planes, and other federally regulated modes of transportation, responsible organizations need to broaden their consultations, make their online content fully accessible, and use complaint data to identify, learn about, and prevent barriers. Our second audit examined whether Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada and the CRTC had improved the accessibility, affordability, and quality of high-speed internet and mobile cellular connectivity for Canadians in rural and remote areas.
And when so much takes place online, it's critical for all Canadians to have access to reliable and affordable high-speed internet and mobile cellular services. This, again, is a matter of inclusion. When services are of poor quality, unaffordable, or unavailable, people are effectively excluded from participating fully and equally in the digital economy, accessing online education, banking, medical care, and government services, or working remotely. We found that overall, access to internet and mobile cellular services has improved across the country since our last audit in 2018. However, internet connectivity in rural and remote areas remains below 60% and below 43% on First Nations reserves. Therefore, while connectivity has improved in urban areas, the federal government's strategy has yet to deliver results for many rural and remote communities and First Nations reserves. We also found that there were delays in approving projects that were meant to bring services to rural and remote areas. This means that the 1.4 million households who are already underserved, First Nations reserves and people in rural and remote areas, are left waiting. Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada tracked only some dimensions of the quality and affordability of services. The department considers pricing to be part of affordability, but not household income. I find this puzzling, because if the price of the service is beyond a household's means, then connectivity will not improve, and some people will remain excluded. Nos constats font ressortir.
These findings emphasize the persistent digital divide for people living on First Nations reserves and in rural and remote communities, compared to people who live in urban areas. The government needs to take action so that there is affordable, high-speed connectivity coverage for Canadians in all areas of the country. Let's now turn to our report on international assistance. Global Affairs Canada spends an average of $3.5 billion each year to support gender equality in low and middle-income countries. But it is unable to show how this spending is improving outcomes for women and girls.
Weaknesses in the department's information management practices. This included not having a standardized approach for storing, managing, and using project information. In addition, the department has not set itself up to track long-term outcomes. So while it is able to show, for example, that money has been spent to provide nutritious meals, it does not know whether long-term health outcomes have improved for people who were supposed to receive these meals. These weaknesses make it impossible for Global Affairs Canada to accurately track and report on the outcomes of funded projects against the goals set out in Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy. These weaknesses were not new. They were flagged in a departmental internal audit in 2021. It is imperative that Global Affairs Canada act immediately to improve its information management practices and reporting on results, to show parliamentarians and Canadians the value of Canada's bilateral international assistance to support women and girls in low and middle income countries. Notre dernier audit.
Our final audit today focused on whether Public Services and Procurement Canada effectively managed the cost, schedule, and scope during the early phases of the rehabilitation program of Parliament's Centre Block. Based on a 2021 estimate, the rehabilitation is expected to cost $4.5 to $5 billion. This vast program involves many partners, such as the House of Commons, the Senate, the Parliamentary Protective Service, and the Library of Parliament. we concluded that Public Services and Procurement Canada used flexible approaches to effectively manage the planning, design, and early construction phases of the program. The department adjusted workflows to deal with delayed planning decisions on important user requirements, such as security.
The department consulted and worked with experts to balance environmental sustainability and accessibility elements while respecting the heritage nature of the building. Given the size and complexity of this undertaking, a streamlined decision-making process will be required to continue effectively managing the costs and timelines of the rehabilitation project as construction work accelerates between now and the planned completion date of 2030-2031. Ces quatre audits donnent
These 4 audits provide a snapshot of progress and concerns in specific areas at one point in time. The public service has a duty to serve all Canada's peoples, and that means working actively to provide as full and equal access as possible to services, opportunities, and national heritage, both within Canada and abroad.
Président.
Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening statement. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Hogan.
Turn to our members. Mr. Mazur, you have the floor for up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the committee members to come in here today. I have to agree with the Auditor General here. Like this report is pretty startling, especially if you're living in rural Canada. It's nothing that we didn't know before, but over 1 million households in rural Canada, and over half of First Nations still don't have access to high-speed internet. I think it's quite startling. I've been hearing that. We've been all hearing this from rural Canada, and now the proof is in the pudding. And I can't get over the government keeps on saying that they have Canadians' backs and they're looking after rural Canada, but the facts aren't lying here. Like, I mean, this is quite detrimental to keeping Canada together. And I thank you so much for bringing these important points out. Another kind of startling, why is this all happening here? We have reports in your report here. You have, the Universal Broadband Fund was supposed to be kind of rolled out and awarded within 10 months. And actually, in your findings here, it took up to 22 months to have some to actually award broadband funds, award these projects. But it was only supposed to take 10 months. It took 22 months, so twice as long. And then the rapid response one, actually, we got adding up the numbers here. It was supposed to be really fast and get those shovel-ready kind of projects. They were supposed to be 5 to 13 weeks, and they were only 40, and they extended out to 41 weeks. So things are a mess, and they're not reporting, and there seems to be no accountability to this. So this is quite troubling for sure. And again, I thank you for bringing this. Shining some light onto these problems. You raised concern about inaccurate connectivity data in your report, and I quote, "We were told that the report coverage information on the National Broadband Internet Service Availability Net was not only out of date, but also sometimes inaccurate. One potential consequence of these inaccuracies was that households or communities without coverage could be shown to have coverage. Does this mean that the government's connectivity data is inflated?"
So you are right, this audit does point out that the digital divide in our country persists. And you mentioned 1.4 million households. I guess to put that into context for some people, that's like every single person who lives in the city of Montreal doesn't have internet access. It's a lot of people. Then when it comes to data, what we were talking about there was the broadband map. So there is a map available online for service providers, anyone who might be interested in launching a project to increase accessibility, or even the average Canadian to go check out. And what we found is that a lot of the data was inaccurate and often pointed out by service providers during our consultations that they repeatedly ask the departments to update it. So that doesn't speak to the statistics that we found and we report on. When we talk about 4 out of 10 households in rural and remote communities not having internet, growing up to 6 out of 10 in First Nations communities, those are accurate numbers. They're validated. We also look at Statistics Canada. But it's that map, that coverage that is used to help fund projects. So you don't want service providers to think that an area is serviced and therefore not recommend a project or not try to get a project funded. So it's really about expanding the access, and so we do recommend that the departments find better ways to ensure that that information is accurate.
And I think you can imagine the frustration from rural Canadians and First Nations when you're being told you have service and you know in fact you don't. So I think we've got a long ways of doing to getting that data accurate and acting on that deficiency as well. The government claimed that they have lowered cell phone bills by 25%. However, you state in your report, and I quote, the government's strategy did not include any national indicators or targets to evaluate whether affordability outcomes are being achieved. Did you find any data that proved that the government has made cell phone service more affordable?
Mr. Chair, I think that that's an excellent question. And when I look at affordability, I think beyond a price. And what we found was that the government is really just tracking price and comparing prices to ensure that they remain affordable. They haven't set targets linked to household incomes. And I believe that's missing half the story. While you can expand access across the country, it doesn't mean that households will pick up the internet service if it isn't affordable to them. So we do recommend that not only do they set indicators to monitor the progress, but that they also consider household income as they evaluate whether or not service is actually affordable.
So the statement that your cell phone service or bill has gone down by 25% is inaccurate? Or how would a Canadian judge that? From what you're finding?
We did not verify in our audit actual invoices to Canadians about cell phone bills. So I can't comment on whether or not that would be an accurate one. But we globally sat back and said, how are you measuring whether the service that is being provided to Canadians is affordable? And just looking at price, in my view, is only looking at half the story. When household income is hugely important. We saw in a recent audit as well about housing, where they measure the affordability of rent by linking it to your income. And so I think that it might be a better way to monitor affordability is by looking at the two metrics.
That's about your time,
okay,
Mr.
thank you,
Mazur.
Chair.
We can come back to you if you like. Turning now to Ms. Yip, you have the floor for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Hogan, in your opening statement, you mentioned these audits are important because every person, regardless of his or her or their health status, gender, or location, has a right to participate fully and equally in society. Some people in Canada have to constantly fight for rights that others take for granted as basic rights. I want to thank you for reminding us with such a visual example, because I found that those words really struck me, as well as your example with the lost luggage. And I think that's really important to remind us. And also that there is so much work to be done still to be in a truly inclusive society. So I'd like to ask you a question regarding the report to improve accessibility for travelers. What progress has been made to continue to achieve a barrier-free Canada?
So we were looking at the Accessibility Act and many of the new regulations that came into effect in 2020. And we found that the entities we looked at, which was Via Rail and the Canadian Air Transportation Security Authority, which is the federal organization that does your baggage screening in the airport, that they had made progress in developing an accessibility plan and doing significant consultations, having those consultations inform their training. But while there is some progress, there's much left to be done in order to reach the federal government's goal of barrier-free transportation by 2040. And I would highlight 3 things. One would be making sure that websites are fully accessible. Many travelers just start their journey there, and you want to be able to independently start a travel journey. The second would be around training to ensure that those providing services understand the lived experiences of persons traveling with disabilities. And then finally, a better use of complaint data to find systemic weaknesses or barriers that just aren't identified normally. So while progress has been made, there's still a lot that needs to be done.
Information not fully accessible.
So there are many regulations for websites in order to make them accessible, and we looked at Via Rail and Canadian Air Transportation Security Authority's websites, and we found some gaps against some of the regulations. About 15 to 17% of the regulations had not yet been met. Some are that the information was either inaccurate, so if you were using a reader to read the website, you would get inaccurate departure times, which is critically important if you're trying to get book travel, but also that information was difficult to find. So, for example, if you were trying to come through security at the airport with your service dog, it was very difficult to know what to expect or how to go about there. So those would just be two of the many examples that we saw. But there's significant regulations here, and it really is up to every service provider to show that they meet those.
There's enough resources put towards improving the accessibility online?
Well, we didn't look at people's websites and their IT resources when we looked at VIA and CATSA. So I think that really is a question to ask to the departments. Some of the gaps were what I would say were probably minor, but others were rather significant if you're going to get inaccurate information. So it's important for them to look at it. But I would point to the Canadian Transportation Agency, which is the federal department that regulates these service for providers. And what we found is they only have 4 individuals who actually monitor all of the service providers and the over 400 different regulations. So we made a recommendation to the agency to determine whether or not they have sufficient resources to enforce and monitor the regulations that do exist.
Management not always complete the accessibility training?
So I think there's many reasons that we heard. Sometimes it was just a timing issue, or in some cases not really clear that individuals who were perhaps in management had to complete the training or not. But when they were made aware of that, improvements occurred. What we found is that members of management are not taking their timing, their training on time. There's a time delay in which it needs to be taken, and then it needs to be renewed. And it's really important that those that set policy or coach individuals or have oversight over those actually dealing with individuals traveling with disabilities understand the policies and the weaknesses. And I know that Via Rail has since ensured that their management has taken the training, and that CATSA will do so by March 31st. So that's an improvement if everyone has done it in the short time frame.
How much time?
Good, 30 seconds.
Did you want to make a comment about the data, your last point in your recommendation?
Are you talking about the accessible transportation? Oh, about complaint data? Oh, I would be happy to talk about complaint data. What we found is that Via Rail and CATSA were really focusing in on dealing with addressing an individual's complaint. And we made recommendations to them to sit back and really look for sort of systemic problems across all their complaint data to see if maybe they have missed something. But then we also looked at the Canadian Transportation Agency, and we found that they don't really have access or the right to have access to a lot of the complaint data, for example, from airlines. And so without that data, they may be missing opportunities to provide better oversight or improve regulations in the future. So there are a few recommendations in our report related about using complaint data in a better way.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup.
Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, you have 6 minutes maximum. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for these interesting reports, enlightening reports. Nevertheless, they bring up this leitmotif that is coming up repeatedly as we read these reports, we see 2 points that recur regularly. One, data management by departments and agencies in government that seem to be defective and seem to date back from another decade. And even project management, which we see in the report on parliamentary rehabilitation. When a decision takes 2 years to be made, that's not something that would happen in the private sector. There seems to be a problem with management, or perhaps there is an issue there, at least to be desired, shall we say. Another issue that is very concerning for the everyday Canadian taxpayer is that government presents itself as the savior and into inclusion and rights for everyone. But in actual fact, we note that this song by Dalida about parole, 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 meaning just words. But unfortunately, outcomes are not there. When you look at international assistance, it's flagrant. You've already raised issues with respect to follow-up performance of these projects. In 2021, you mentioned these things, and there's been no improvement. A lot of money is being spent on a lot of programs, really for noble causes, to help women throughout the world. But at the end of the day, we have no way of knowing whether women are any better for it, are doing any better off. Having worked in these fields myself, I know performance indicators are called for by donors, benefactors. I'm wondering why in Canada there hasn't been more asked of the government as to the money that it's sending abroad. As to performance indicators, from a more global perspective, Madam Auditor General, you've done many performance audits in the past as well, I believe. What is the best practice when it comes to following the performance of these funds? Well, you mentioned a number of points there. I'll focus on your last question. In my view, performance indicators need to focus on 2 things: products and progress or results. In our audit on international assistance that is focused on supporting gender equality, there are 26 indicators that were established to follow up on progress, but 24 out of these 26 indicators only have to do with products and not results. So I'll give you an example. We had looked at a project that wanted to make schools more welcoming to young girls. So they would build washrooms for girls with sanitary facilities so they could wash their hands. What Global Affairs could show us was that they had actually had these washrooms built, but they hadn't looked at how frequently girls were going to school. Or those are the objectives. We need both. We need the products, so that we can follow the progress over the years. At the end of the day, the major objective may take years to demonstrate, so you need both sides. How much time do I have left, Mr. Chair? 2.5 minutes. Rather, 1 minute and 50 seconds, rather. What you're saying is very interesting when it comes to results. What's missing? Is it a matter of data, organization, structure within the department? I'd say both. On the one hand, it's about how these things are established. They didn't really give themselves the opportunity to collect the information at the beginning of a program. When they set these targets to assess progress, they didn't include measures that had to do with results. So not having established that from the start means that over the years, you don't have that information. It can take years. If you look at improvement to sanitary facilities, it can take years to know what the results are. You need to start that data collection from the start and throughout. So that really has to do with planning. I'll admit it's difficult to look at results, but it is so crucial to do so. Absolutely. So quick question. For Parliament, you know, this is something that I've been thinking about. We're talking about $4.5 to $5 billion for rehabilitation of Parliament. Why did you not include the work, construction work that is related to rehabilitation of the rehabilitation of the West Block, for instance, where parliamentarians had to go in the interim? Why not have a broader scope for the audit? West Block is complete. We're in the building. We wanted to really focus on work underway. This is a broad scope project involving many partners, and this will be the second time we will have looked at rehabilitation of Centre Block. The first time around, we noted that governance was stalling some decisions, and we wanted to see if there had been an improvement now at the beginning of the construction phase. And we're seeing that the decision-making is still fragmented, and it takes time. It's the job of Public Service Procurement Canada to find ways to improve decision-making, because many partners are involved here, and you need to find a balance between the environment, accessibility, the user's needs, and the heritage aspect of the building itself. There's a lot that needs to be managed, and it's time to improve decision-making. Thank you very much.
You have the floor for up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I too want to thank the Auditor General and her office for what I believe are good reports for us as members of the Public Accounts Committee to review. And in particular, I really appreciate your opening comments. Oftentimes when I am in this committee, I find oftentimes there's the similar trend that you see, which is that there seems to be processes that are intended to include Canadians, many Canadians from diverse backgrounds, and oftentimes they don't make the mark. For decades and decades and decades, people fall behind. These issues that you're presenting, both the accessibility challenges for persons with disabilities, the digital divide, they've been well known to Canadians for a long time. They felt it, they may have felt it isolated and alone at that time, but I think what you're saying here in many ways verifies their truth. So I want to thank you for that. It's oftentimes the hardest piece for marginalized groups to obtain a credible assertion to these experiences. And without that, it makes it very difficult for the government, I think, in some part, to understand fully the totality of these experiences. So I want to thank you for your work and truly centering people. And I really want to talk about the importance of people and the importance of how these investments or lack thereof don't in fact help some people. And there's these clear audits, one being the accessibility challenges present within transport and via rail. The analogy used about the lack of a wheelchair upon arrival, I can only sympathize with that kind of pain and struggle. It would make me fearful of wanting to travel ever, and never wanted to experience the vastness of this great country. It is a kind of sadness that I think many of us have been on the opposite end of. We've been able to go everywhere, whether it's by plane, train, or car. We can go everywhere in this country and see, in my home province, beautiful mountains, or if it's the Great Lakes, or if it's the oceans of either end. We have that freedom, but persons with disabilities still don't. And it's a shameful reality that I'm happy that you've highlighted here, and one that I hope our committee and our report truly identifies and changes that need to be made within Transport Canada. I do also want to make a mention about the digital divide and how hurtful that digital divide has become, particularly while we navigate COVID. COVID-19 is still with us. It's been a devastating impact on rural and remote areas, more so than urban areas at times. Part of that is the challenges that parents, and particular teachers in rural settings, have had to have. I know I've spoken to many teachers where their students didn't have connectivity. That meant years of children, particularly on First Nations reserves, that were unable to learn. These have long-lasting effects. We're talking about a kind of society we want to build, and when we don't include people within our digital spaces, which is the growing space in Canada, which is one that First Nations find themselves continuously excluded, it's clear by these reports what has to be done in terms of closing the gap, and I really appreciate the auditor's work on making sure that these are identified. And last, I do want to make comment on a third report, the global efforts toward better outcome for women, and the fact that during this really challenging time across the globe, where I believe women leadership is necessary now more than ever, we're seeing at the same time troubling concerns with the lack of attention towards violence against women, not just here in Canada, but right across the globe. And so it's imperative that our country be a leader in this space and demonstrate the value of women, both in government but in every organization. And it's troubling to hear that the investments toward this end aren't hitting the gaps. And you mentioned a school, for example, construction of bathrooms in a school, but not knowing how many girls are going to that school. These are a really important piece for us to understand because, of course, we're in Canada and sometimes we're isolated by these realities, and we think, that's awesome, and awesome that we're investing in this, but we don't often see the gaps of our results, and that's an important piece that I also want to mention. I do want to turn directly to the digital divide in First Nations communities to speak particularly to some troubling facts. On your website, you published today in association with your reports clear statistics of accessibility challenges for First Nations. In my home province of Alberta and right across the prairies, you can see clearly that we have a huge gap between First Nations and the rest of Canadians in those places. Just to read some of these facts, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba average below 25% in terms of First Nations accessibility. Alberta, 26.9% of First Nations have digital connectivity. Saskatchewan, 10%. Manitoba, 14%. But if you look at comparable jurisdictions just beside Alberta, if you cross the border, First Nations have 71.5% access. You look Northwest Territories, just north of my province, even further, even larger and more remote, 74.89%. Ms. Hogan, why is Alberta and many of the prairies so far behind these other statistics, particularly British Columbia and Northwest Territories?
So it's an excellent question, and I knew when we published this map that we would get this kind of question, but we really sat back and didn't dissect it by province. Our objective was really to look at whether the government was meeting its goal overall. And it's clear when you look at all of the First Nations reserves together that when 6 out of 10 households do not have internet, that's the majority. And, it's really a sort of a fundamental need, I think, in today's society, and the pandemic has just accelerated that need. What I would point to is probably the lack of slowness in the approval of some of the funding projects that are available. We know that funding is there. It's just that the two entities are slow to approve those projects, and the longer it takes for projects to get out there, the more individuals in the prairies and other parts of the country will wait.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Ms. Gray, you have the floor for approximately 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone for being here today. My questions are on Report 1, the Accessible Transportation for Persons with Disabilities. And my first question is, were you concerned by the delayed or failed uptake in accessibility training by Via Rail and Canada Air Transport Security Authority by their senior management, even when it was mandatory?
I'm always concerned when training isn't taken, but more so here when it comes to accessibility needs. The training of supervisors and executive is just as essential as those who actually deliver the services, because they either set the policies or guide and exercise oversight over individuals providing direct services. So here the training needs to be done within, I think, 60 days of employment, and then it needs to be repeated. It needs to be refreshed, and it really does help identify unconscious biases and really tackle what I would say is an attitudinal barrier, perhaps sometimes when it comes to accessible transportation. And so Via Rail has told us that all their executive have since our audit completed that training, and that at CATSA they will do it by March 31st. So I'm happy to see that they'll take that seriously, and hopefully they'll continue that trend.
Great, thank you. The report mentions that there was only one on-site inspection and 47 virtual by the Canadian Transportation Agency to identify, remove, and prevent barriers. Do you think that inspections in person would be required to fully identify accessibility issues? And did you find virtual inspections to be as effective as the in-person ones?
So in our audit, we didn't compare the virtual inspections to previous years where they would have perhaps been done in person. Virtual was the mode used mostly during the pandemic. In my view, what we saw in those inspections, however, is that they were really just focusing in on the design of the service instead of the actual service delivery. And that's why the fact that they're now moving back to in-person inspections, I believe, will help improve that oversight mechanism and then hopefully help remove barriers.
Great, thank you. My last question is: the Canadian transportation industry is responsible for enforcement, and yet they don't have access to complaints. And my understanding is there's an obligation for airlines to report in other countries, such as in the United States, but not in Canada. Even Canadian airlines operating in the U.S. And so there appears to be less oversight in Canada. By the Canadian Transportation Association. Are there rules, in fact, that are different? How does this play out practically? And is there something that should be changed?
So the accessibility requirements between Canada and the United States are rather similar. What is different is some of the authority that the Canadian Transportation Agency has in its oversight. So it's the sort of reporting and monitoring that is different between the two countries. What we found is that CTA doesn't really have the authority to ask for all the complaint data. So, for example, from airlines. If you look at in the United States, where Canadian air carriers are required to report to the U.S. authority any damaged or stolen wheelchairs or lost wheelchairs or any issues with service dogs, that same mandatory requirement does not exist here in Canada. And we identified that as a gap and made a recommendation to CTA and said that they should try to find ways to get access to it. That might be the policymakers giving them that authority, or them working collaboratively with airlines and to get access to that information in order to improve oversight.
And thank you very much, Ms. Gray. I can come back to you if you have further questions. Mr. Genuis, and just for committee members, this is informal, so if you have questions, catch my eye. If not, we'll go to those members that do. So, Mr. Genuis, you have the floor for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm the lead for our Party for International Development, and I was very struck by your report 4 that looks at the dissonance, frankly, between the words the government uses around empowering women and gender internationally and the reality of what's happening. We know that Liberals love to talk about gender and international development. Your report shows that they're not measuring results. 50 out of 60 projects you looked at didn't have complete data. 35 of those 60 projects, only 35 of those projects actually measured policy indicators, and the vast majority of those policy indicators actually had nothing to do with results. 2 out of 3 of the spending commitments were not met, and those are spending commitments. Those aren't results commitments. Those are simply spending commitments. So massive gap between the rhetoric on gender and the reality in terms of what is not being measured and what is not being achieved. And I think, Sally, this underlines that the government is trying to push a particular message to a domestic audience about what they do and don't care about, and yet they can't be bothered to consistently track the data. I want to ask you to share a bit more about the challenges you had in accessing this data. What kind of challenges did you experience in getting access to the data that the government did have? And how do you explain the fact that in so many cases there's no data being gathered around outcomes whatsoever?
So we looked at how Global Affairs is managing international assistance to support gender equality in low to middle income countries. And we found that they weren't able to show us how all the spending, was $3.5 billion a year, actually improved the lives of women and girls. And I would point to two issues, and it will link to the issue that we had about getting access to information. So the first was the significant weakness in information management. So that is fundamental, and it was systemic across the organization. It was from gathering data, how you store it, how you manage it together, roll it up, and use it for decision making. A lot is done by paper or not even in the same IT system if there is IT systems. And so it took us about 4 months to gain access to the information that we needed to do our work. That just shows me that senior management's not using it for day-to-day decision making. And then we saw that it really is an incomplete external reporting because they're only putting about half of their projects in their external reporting. The second thing I would point to as to why they couldn't show us how the investment was improving the lives of women and girls would be about the indicators. So they didn't set themselves up to monitor outcomes. 24 out of 26 of their indicators really just looked at results along the way, like little things along the way. I would give you an example about providing nutritious meals to women. And they might track how many meals were delivered, but then did not set themselves up to monitor whether health would improve over time. And sometimes results, especially in these kinds of programs, take time to measure, but they haven't set themselves up. So it's really about the design right up at the outset about these projects, but then about the management of all the data linked to it to show the value of this investment.
And
that was
thank
missing.
you. Pardon me. And thank you very much. I'm turning next to Mr. Fragascatos. And Ms. Shanahan, I do see you online there. Mr. Fragascatos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hogan, for your report, and to your staff as well. What does I want to put the matter in context, but think broader as well, and that's why I want to ask about the international situation. In the course of your work, did you look at what other democracies are faced with in terms of connectivity in rural and remote areas, and how Canada compares?
We did try to do some comparisons. We turned to the OECD as well to look at what they were doing. It is difficult to compare Canada to some other countries. We have a very geographically vast country with low population density in many areas. And if we look at our urban centers, they're being served to 99%. It's really those hard to reach. And I think that's why the issue of getting to the last few is going to be costly. And we recommended that the departments really look at how much it will cost to get there. And that's why linking it back to household income when you look at affordability is essential. Most other countries do focus just on price. And so we do think that given the nature of Canada, looking at household income is essential because of how costly it will be to reach the last few.
Understood. And there you just used the phrase, the nature of Canada, and in the early part of your answer, you talked about the uniqueness of this country, looking at the OECD, making comparisons, and in some ways, I don't want to put words in your mouth, it sounds like I'm asking you to compare apples to oranges, and point well taken in that regard. So based on that, can we say that Canada finds itself in a very unique position, certainly among democracies, when it comes to this whole question of ensuring connectivity for all citizens? Not every country has the remoteness of Canada, right? Vast landscape, very hard to serve all Canadians. This does not mean that we shouldn't make every effort to do so, and that there's many improvements to be made in getting to that goal. But are we unique among democracies? Is that a fair understanding?
I'm not sure I would go that far. I think not every country has the means of Canada as well. And here we found that funding is available. It's that it's slow to see projects being approved in order to be rolled out. And I think while you can compare us to other countries and see that we're doing well, if we look at pricing and, we're following the same sort of metrics as other countries are. But when you sit back and look at it, we do have 4 out of 10 households in rural and remote communities with no internet, and 6 out of 10 on First Nations reserves, which when you look at today's society, internet being really a fundamental need, I think there's a lot of work left to be done.
Oh, certainly, no disagreement there on the importance of the issue and the work that needs to be done. Where have you looked at previous years? For example, 10 years ago, where were we when it comes to connectivity, both in terms of the Indigenous focus and also in terms of rural and remote areas more generally? Can we put on that on the record? That I think that would be interesting to have that.
So we do have an exhibit in our report that goes that far back. I don't have them committed to my memory, so if you give me 2 seconds, I will take a quick gander back. We've tracked back to 2018. And you can see that if we look at First Nations reserves in 2018, they had access in 31.6% of the cases. That has grown to 42.9%. So Canada's connectivity strategy is absolutely making progress. The strategy is meant to target rural and remote communities, including First Nations. It's just there's a lot left to be done when you think about how many households still do not have access.
And thank you very much. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and many thanks to the Auditor General again for this work that is so important to accomplishing the goals that we all have. And once again, what it's so important what we're seeing here, the theme of inclusion, that I think the focus there is on the outcome. Am I right, Auditor General, and not just the measurement of activities? You've spoken about this before.
Absolutely. I think you need to measure activity along the way. You need to show progress and know whether or not you need to adjust your approach, but the ultimate goal should really be on the outcome.
Yeah, and I think that is what we're here for. Is we've got a vision, we've got very ambitious goals, but it's in the implementation of the programs and policies to get to those goals where we can encounter difficulties. So again, around the design of measures, and I'm not targeting any particular report here, although I do want to talk about the connectivity report a little bit as well. But in the design measures, what is the role of consultation then with the stakeholders in designing measures that we're actually going to be able to collect the relevant data?
I think when it comes to connectivity, absolutely collaboration and coordination with stakeholders is essential. The service providers need to provide that information, and there's a lot of coordination here with other levels of government. As we saw in our audit, there are certain MOUs that have been signed with provinces to ensure that they coordinate and make sure that the joint money goes further in order to increase accessibility. So it isn't just the federal government working here, and it is important to have that good collaboration, but then to also speak to stakeholders to know their needs. Or their pain points and their concerns. And we did that during our audit as well, and we raised in our audit some of the concerns they flagged to us, which was around how slow it was for departments to approve funding so that projects could get underway.
Thank you. And just on the report concerning access to rural and remote communities, so important in that in your report that you do that disaggregation, because overall, if I'm reading the key findings correctly, over 90% of households have been connected by 2021, but that's not good enough, and I get it. We need to have, we need to get to that, the dernier rang, as we say in Quebec, to that last household. So you did mention the MOUs. So are all provinces on board to working with the federal government to make 100% coverage a reality?
I do believe that there are 7 provinces that have MOUs with the government because they already have connectivity initiatives. So whenever there is a connectivity initiative in one of the provinces, they have signed an MOU with the government in order to not duplicate efforts, but to expand efforts. When it does come to coverage, while the country does show 90% connectivity, that does camouflage the results of rural and remote communities and First Nations reserves, right? So we shouldn't forget that 1.4 million households are underserved or not served at all. And that's sizable. It is like every single person who lives in the city of Montreal not having internet. So that is a large group of people in the country that still need to be reached.
Thank you very much, Auditor. Turning now to Mr. Genuis again for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Auditor General, could you just dig in further on the significance of it taking you 4 months to get access to certain information? Because oftentimes as parliamentarians, it takes us a long time to get certain information, and they say, oh, it's translation or whatever it is. But you've drawn the specific conclusion that the fact that it took you such a long time to get that information really indicates that people within the department don't have access to the information either, that it took them so long to get it because the information is just not readily available, and that means to the extent that it exists, it's not being used.
So, normally when we provide information requests to departments that we audit, they provide us that rather quickly because they should be using it for decision-making purposes. And what we found here is that there was no standardized approach to storing that information or gathering it. We then went a little further than that and went to see whether or not senior management committees and senior management groups were asking and looking for the information. And because it might not just be that maybe it's being provided up but just not used and so on. And I think the issues that we saw were pretty vast. Taking 4 months in my mind is a great amount of time. Because we weren't able to analyze at detail all 60 files that we would have liked to. We did a real deep dive on gender analysis, and we would have liked to have done that more broadly. We were only able to look at 10 because of the timing of when we received information. But if you don't have it readily at your fingertips in a database, that means you're not using it to make fundamental decisions like, are we achieving good outcomes in this one area of the world, and should we spend more money there or allocate money in a different place? But then you're also not demonstrating the actual outcomes of this large investment, and so it is important that they fix those information management weaknesses.
That's really important for us to understand. And then in terms of the spending commitments, so the report identifies sort of 3 commitments around spending. One is that 80% of or more of projects kind of include consideration for gender. 15% be focused on gender in particular, and then 50% of those projects or more be in sub-Saharan Africa. Of those 3, the first is the only one that they satisfied, and in some ways that's the easiest one to satisfy because it's not that difficult to say a project includes a gender lens, but it's the other 2 that are more specifically measurable in terms of achieving them or failing to achieve them, and they failed to achieve them. What do you make of that?
Well, I guess I would highlight a few things. I think during the pandemic, some of the funding was used in different ways in order to ensure that, for example, if girls couldn't go to school, that they would get tablets instead of building something in a school. But I agree with you that when you spend more on just considering gender, and it could be as easy as a gender analysis in a project, you take away from the other buckets, and evidence shows that when you really do empower women and girls, you will drive meaningful and important change. And I think that's why we included a comment about needing to really focus on meeting those spending commitments. I guess what I would highlight, however, is that the policy just has 3 spending commitments, and those commitments aren't really about outcomes and making the lives of women and girls better. And that was another recommendation that we gave, is that they should actually have some targets that measure progress.
Thank you very much. I just have 2 more 2 more members on my list, and then we're going to have to let Ms. Hogan depart because she has another appointment after ours. I'll be going first to Ms. Gray, and then Ms. Bradford will end it for us. So, Ms. Gray, you have the floor for up to 3 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Hogan, the report refers to the accessibility of online information as one of the barriers most frequently experienced by travelers with disabilities. And it refers to online information that was often not fully accessible. And there was an example given, such as incorrect information for a person using a screen reader, or information that was difficult to find, and specifically that there was a departure time for a person with visual impairments that wasn't correct. So did you find that this was something that came up often with regards to the online information barriers, and was this something that you found was a real issue that needs to be addressed?
I think fundamentally, if you think about the last trip that you may have built, chances are you started that by going to a website somewhere and figuring out how to get there or where you would stay. And so it's really important that websites be accessible so that individuals with disabilities can independently book their travel. Statistics Canada found that the most frequent barrier that individuals with disabilities face is issues with the website. So it's constantly being flagged as important. So we looked at whether or not Via Rail's website and CATSA's website met all of the accessibility requirements, and we found that there was a 17% gap for Via's website and 15% for for CATSA. You highlighted some of the examples that we raised, but this is really just the place where you start. And if you're discouraged because you are unable to independently book your travel, you may not travel. And that would not be really, I think, the most desired outcome. Really, you want everyone to be able to freely move around our beautiful country.
Great, thank you. My next question is, your report looked at the agencies covered by the Accessible Canada Act, which has a goal of barrier-free Canada by 2040. Did you feel in your assessment while going through the audit that there was an urgency to meet these goals by 2040?
We saw a lot of progress being done, and I think consultation being the first one. However, I would highlight that I think consultation should be more broad and done on a more continuous basis. It really isn't a one and done kind of thing here. I would hope that action will be taken to sort of to bridge some of the issues that we found, but then to keep focusing on meeting a real, true barrier-free transportation in Canada before 2040. That would be a long time to wait for all of these issues to be fixed.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. You're down just a few seconds, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bradford now so we don't hold the AG and her team up too long. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses here today. Ms. Hogan, continuing on that accessible transportation for people with disabilities, on page 20, you refer to the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority. They categorize complaints by their nature and not the status of the person. So sometimes people that had these challenges based on their disability weren't captured correctly. You gave the example about screening a service dog was considered a complaint related to the screening process, as opposed rather than a complaint related to a person with disability. Are there other examples that you can give us where they're miscategorized, and so we're not capturing fully the impact on people with disabilities?
Well, this is linked to the recommendation that we gave about better analysis and use of complaint data. What we found was that the entities were really just trying to address someone's complaint and in a timely way. And we recommended that they sit back and really look at the data. And we did some word searches. For example, we looked at mobility devices, service dogs, autism. We looked for words that might indicate that the traveler or someone traveling with the traveler had a disability. And we found almost 1,000 complaints that contained similar words, and we had a broad view. Not all of them will necessarily be an individual with this disability traveling, but this just shows the importance of sitting back and really looking for systemic issues throughout the complaint data, and that's really not being done by VIA and CATSA. And so we hope that will improve their ability to identify potential barriers so that they can remove those in the future.
Back to report number 4 about the gender equality and Global Affairs Canada. You do make the comment, and I just want to get it on the record again, the departmental spending in 2021 and 21-22 fiscal years was affected by world events, particularly in this case COVID, so that some money was reallocated to respond to needs resulting from COVID, and that might have affected their meeting their spending targets. So getting back to that, we didn't meet 2 of 3 spending commitments. Can you just reiterate which is the one that we did meet out of the 3?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're right. I think COVID did likely contribute to some of the reasons why the spending commitments weren't met. And I think one of them is very close. They almost inched to the 49%. But obviously that means you still need to be focused on how you allocate money to projects. So the one of the 3 spending commitments that was met was the one where 80% of spending needs to be gender inclusive projects. So that could be as simple as a gender analysis all the way to something that really targets women and girls. So there really is a vast array of projects that are included in that bucket.
Thank you. And that is our time for today. Ms. Hogan, Auditor, I want to thank you and your team for the work you've done. You've given not only us, but I think all parliamentarians a lot to consider with these reports. As I mentioned to you previously, These are all important. The accessibility, whether it's high-speed internet or Canada's transportation system, and looking for results. So I do want to thank you again. I appreciate you coming in. I know there's a lot going on this week. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting, and the subcommittee will be meeting in camera right after this. Thank you, everyone.